Chapter 1981. The call was from Yi Muyun. His voice was a little hoarse. "Cher, where are you?" Obviously, he had called this number when he woke up in the morning in America. Cher bit the tip of her pen and said softly after a while, "At school." On the other side, Yi Muyun looked at his watch and narrowed his eyes. "Who else?" Cher looked around. "There are a lot of people, about 7 or 8. Yi Muyun's voice became hoarser. "Boys or girls?" Cher's voice was soft like cotton candy. "None of them are as handsome as you, brother." Her words pleased Mr. Yi Muyun. He smiled and got up with his phone. He walked straight to the bathroom, took off his pee with one hand, and talked to her on the phone with the other. Cher frowned when she heard the voice. She asked softly, "Brother, what are you doing?" Yi Muyun calmly said 2 words and immediately said, "You're not allowed to hang up." The little girl heard him brushing his teeth, so she couldn't help asking, "Did you wash your hands?" He directly said no. Cher didn't say anything. "Baby, I'm just an ordinary person." Yi Muyun's voice was very low. "Do you miss me?" Cher's face was a little hot because of his sudden tenderness. After a while, she said softly, "Yes." Yi Muyun was satisfied. "I'll be back in a week." Maybe because he was in a hurry, he hung up soon. Cher put down the phone and blushed slightly. Zhou Chengwang looked at her and smiled. "It's him." "Yes." Shui lifted her eyes and smiled. Zhou Chengwang was smart enough not to continue asking, but it wasn't that he wasn't touched. It was impossible to say that she didn't like Yi Muyun at all, because when she was talking to Yi Muyun, her eyes were bright and beautiful, which he had never seen before. He felt bitter in his heart. It was not that he had no confidence in himself, but that his opponent was too strong. Cher hung up the phone and looked at the time. It was getting late. "Zhou Chengwang, I want to leave first." She had nothing to do anyway. She had come to the student union not only because she was provoked, but also because she wanted to experience the feeling of freedom. Zhou Chengwang stared at her for a while before he slowly said, "There's a welcoming party for new students tonight. Are you coming?" He was young, and his eyes burned as he looked at her intently. Zhao Zi, who was at the side, heard this and laughed in his heart. It's already been a month since school started, and there's still a welcome party for new students. It was obvious that he wanted to get closer to the young lady. However, he still didn't expose Zhou Chengwang. Cher hesitated for a moment before asking softly, "Can we have skewers?" She had an inexplicable obsession with eating skewers. Perhaps it was because she didn't go when Zheng Xini and the others invited her in the past, so she had been brooding over it. At this moment, her eyes were sparkling like the brightest stars in the sky. Zhou Chengwang looked at her for a long time before he chuckled softly. "Of course. Then I'll go." She actually said somewhat childishly, and then continued to draw her picture while lying on her stomach. She was still drawing Yi Muyun. Zhou Chengwang felt as though he had gone crazy. In her heart, in her world, there was clearly only that man, but he still wanted to get involved. Even if it was just a glance at him, even if she was by his side thinking of someone else, he was willing. Chapter 1982. Zhou Chengwang felt that his heart had never been so soft before. He had never treated a girl so sincerely. Zhao Zi understood him. He clapped his hands and said, "All right, I'll now announce that there will be an event tonight. The president will treat us to kebabs." They were all young people and naturally liked group activities. Moreover, it was Zhou Chengwang who was treating, so everyone applauded and cheered. Only Zheng Xini's smile was a little forced. Her gaze fell on Cher's face, and she realized that Cher was also looking at Zhou Chengwang, and she was smiling. After that, the work progressed quickly. Everyone gathered before 7 o'clock. Most of them were boarding students, so most of them rode their bicycles. Cher didn't know how to ride a bicycle. When she was hesitating about whether she should hail a taxi, Zhou Chengwang's car stopped in front of her. "Get in the car." His voice was gentle. "I'll take you there." Cher took a small step back and was a little hesitant. Ever since she was young, she had never interacted with any young men except Yi Muyun, let alone Zhou Chengwang. She didn't take it to heart, but it didn't mean that she was a blockhead. As if sensing her hesitation, Zhou Chengwang deliberately scared her. "If you hail a taxi at this hour, you might meet a weird uncle." He likes young and beautiful girls the most. Cher glanced at him. You look like a middle-aged, eccentric uncle right now. Zhou Chengwang smiled brightly. Really? I always thought that my image was very positive. He paused and patted the seat cushion behind him. Get in, or it'll be too late. Cher thought about it and sat on the seat, keeping a distance of 20 centimeters from him. Of course, Zhou Chengwang could feel it. He smiled slightly and rode out of the school gate with the little girl. The night wind blew her long hair, and there was a faint fragrance in the air. Cher sat on the back seat, smelling the kapok flowers on both sides of the road. She closed her eyes slightly. It wasn't because of who she was with, but because at this moment, she really smelled the scent of freedom. She greedily looked at the night view of the city and everything on the streets. Everything was new to her. Zhou Chengwang rode a bicycle with her. It should have taken him only 10 minutes to get there, but they ended up riding for half an hour. He took a detour. Zhao Zi chose a famous barbecue restaurant. The group of 10 or so people sat down and waited for Zhou Chengwang and Cher. They waited for about 15 minutes. As for the reason why Zhou Chengwang was late, those who were tactful had a tacit understanding. Although the girls had thoughts about Zhou Chengwang, because Zhou Chengwang had never expressed his feelings, they were not particularly upset. On the contrary, it was quite interesting to see the school's Prince Charming chasing after a girl. Zhou Chengwang went in with Cher. It was a peaceful scene. Zhao Zi and the others had already ordered their food. Not long after they sat down, plates of skewers were served. Cher stared at them for a long time, then carefully took a small bite. The taste was a little strange, but after 2 bites, she felt that it was quite delicious. Zhou Chengwang kept looking at her with a doting expression. He even handed her a beer. Cher reached out to take it. She hesitated for a moment and looked around. Everyone else was drinking. She really wanted to try it, so she took a small sip. It didn't taste very good and was sour. She didn't want to drink anymore, but Zhao Zi and the others still forced her to drink 2 glasses. She had never drunk alcohol before, so 2 glasses was enough to make her slightly drunk. Her face was red, and she was drunk. Chapter 1983. She hadn't forgotten that she had to go home early. Yi Muyun would call her at 9 o'clock, but she didn't want to leave when she saw everyone chatting. She was actually a little greedy. It wasn't that she liked these people, but she yearned for freedom and freedom. She had the urge to turn off her phone so that he wouldn't be able to find her, but she didn't dare to. She felt that she was like Cinderella. She had to show her true colors when the time came. So, at 8:30, she leaned on the table and said that she wanted to go home. Zhou Chengwang looked at her and sighed softly. What should we do? Do you know where she lives? We can use our privileges to check. Zhao Zi drank a few bottles, but his expression didn't change. Zhou Chengwang smiled. He took his phone and logged into the school's website. When he saw the address, he took another look at Cher. Pei Garden was a gift from Tang Yu to Pei Chi-Chi. Everyone in B City knew about it, and the fact that she was living in Pei Garden still made Zhou Chengwang feel a little pressured. Just as he was in a daze, Zhao Zi saw it too and couldn't help but take another look at him. Zhou Chengwang quietly kept his phone and said calmly, I'll send her back. Right after he said that, Zhang Xini stood up abruptly. Her face was a little red as she gritted her teeth. I'll go with you. Zhou Chengwang looked at Zhang Xini for a while before saying calmly, I'll send her back alone. After that, I'll go straight home. Zhang Xini couldn't say anything else. Although Cher was drunk, she was a good drinker. The moment Zhou Chengwang asked her to go home, she got up obediently and held on to Zhou Chengwang's arm as they walked outside. Zhou Chengwang picked up her school bag and carried it. He nodded at Zhao Zi. Help me ride my bike back. Zhao Zi smiled and caught the car keys he tossed over. After Zhou Chengwang left, he couldn't help but tease him a little. Outside the barbecue restaurant, Zhou Chengwang was helping Cher to stop a taxi. It was almost 9 o'clock. It was difficult to get a taxi. Cher had always been a delicate woman, so how could she endure such hardship? She was drunk and tired, and soon she could not take it anymore. Half of her body leaned on Zhou Chengwang's arm, and her voice was unclear. I want to go home. She did not forget that her brother would call her before she went to bed at night. She looked at her watch. It was already past 9 o'clock. Right at this moment, her phone rang. Her little face was filled with an unconcealable panic. Her little hand reached for her phone. In the end, it was Zhou Chengwang who found it in her bag and handed it to her. Brother, she was so obedient and quiet that she did not seem like a drunk girl at all. Her voice was heart-wrenching. However, no matter how normal she acted, Yi Muyun, who was far away in America, could not help but frown and ask softly, "What are you doing?" Cher was always drunk. Even though she was afraid of him, she was not good at lying. Right now, her brain was even worse. She looked around in a daze before replying, "I'm waiting for a taxi outside." Yi Muyun narrowed his eyes. "Where?" "I'll get someone to pick you up." Cher looked around, and her head was even more muddled now. After a long time, she spoke, "I'm eating skewers." "Eating skewers?" Yi Muyun's sharp senses told him that there was something wrong with her as he asked coldly, "You've been drinking?" "Yeah." Cher frowned and acted coquettishly. "It tastes pretty bad." Yi Muyun narrowed his eyes. "Stay where you are and don't move. I'll get someone to pick you up." Chapter 1984. Cher put down the phone in a daze and looked at Zhou Chengwang. "Someone will come to pick me up later. You continue to eat with them." As she spoke, her body swayed a little. Zhou Chengwang supported her and said in a low voice, "I shouldn't have let you drink." She was so strictly controlled that she must have never touched these things. Although he liked her, he didn't want to cause trouble for her. He didn't want her to be put in a difficult position by that person. Yi Muyun's world was a world that Zhou Chengwang couldn't understand. It was a mysterious and unknown world. Perhaps he would enter that world one day, but he thought that it might take him 10 or 20 years to reach that height. Unknowingly, he was in awe of that man who was the same age as him. He still insisted on accompanying her to wait for the car, but he knew in his heart that it was unlikely for them to be together. Meng Qingqing's car arrived in less than 20 minutes. It was driven by the driver, Xiao Zhao. Meng Qingqing was also in the car. It just so happened that he had a social engagement just now, so it was very close. The car stopped, and Meng Qingqing got out of the car personally. When he saw Cher and Zhou Chengwang standing side by side, he was stunned for a moment, and his expression was a little complicated. He sighed in his heart. "Xiao Xue." Cher looked at Meng Qingqing as if she was looking at her biological father. In fact, Meng Qingqing didn't treat her any less than Tang Yu, her biological father. Holding the slightly drunk girl, he turned his head and looked at Zhou Chengwang. "Thank you for taking care of her." For an elder like Meng Qingqing, Zhou Chengwang had a good impression of him. He smiled slightly. "She only drank 2 glasses of beer. They're all classmates, and there are no messy people. Don't worry, uncle." For this kid, Meng Qingqing looked at him a little more, and he had a good impression of him. He sighed in his heart that such a show-off young man deserved Xiao Xue if it wasn't for Muyan. Perhaps she was very tired and sleepy. When Xiao Xue touched Meng Qingqing, she was completely relieved and fell asleep on his shoulder. Zhou Chengwang looked at her, and his eyes flickered slightly. He was also a meticulous person, and he could immediately understand that in her subconscious, Zhou Chengwang, was not a reliable person. Even when she was drunk, she could still maintain her consciousness. Now, her look softened, and this was probably the difference between a family member and an outsider. Zhou Chengwang's heart turned a little cold, but he still closed the car door for Meng Qingqing very gracefully. "Goodbye, uncle." "Uncle," Meng Qingwang's heart, and he said in a low voice. The car slowly started, and with one hand holding Xiao Xue, Meng Qingqing dialed Mu Yun's number with the other, and said in a low voice, "I got it, and it's getting late. I'll bring her home, and let your Aunt Xiao take care of her." Yi Muyun was at ease to leave the person in Meng Qingqing's hands. He trusted Meng Qingqing completely, because he heard about Tang Xian's story from Pei Qiqi. Yi Muyun knew that Xiao Xue and Meng Qingqing were actually special. He was very possessive, but he was quite generous when Meng Qingqing occasionally took Xiao Xue out for a meal. Meng Qingqing also seemed to understand that this was the tacit understanding between the two men. After hanging up the phone, the black limousine drove towards the Meng family's villa, and far away in New York, After putting down the phone, Yi Mu-yoon's face darkened. His phone just received a few photos, and they were all of Cher and Zhou Chengwang. Chapter 1985. She was smiling at that person. Yi Mu-yoon had always thought that she would only smile like that at him, but it turned out that she could also smile at others. The golden pin broke into two in his hand. Was this the freedom she wanted? His special assistant, Gu Zhe, stood behind him and said softly, "Mr. Yi, it's time for the meeting." Yi Mu-yoon paused for 2 seconds before slowly turning around. His voice was a little tired. "Okay, I got it." City B. Meng Qingqing's car slowly stopped on the lawn in front of the villa. After the car stopped, the driver opened the door for him, and he got out of the car with Cher at his arms. "Mr. Meng, do you want me to come?" The driver had also watched Cher grow up. CEO Meng had drunk a lot tonight, so he asked worriedly. Meng Qingqing said calmly, "It's okay. You can go and rest." The driver was silent for a while, but he still left. The elders of the Tang and Meng families all knew about the relationship between Meng Qingqing and Tang Xian. Although it didn't start, it still left a regret. Meng Qingqing treated Tang Xian well. Everyone saw it, but no one said it out loud. Meng Qingqing had drunk a little tonight. At this moment, he was a little drunk. His head was a little dizzy, and his steps were a little light. Fortunately, the little girl in his arms was still as light as a feather. Xiaoran stood on the stairs and watched Meng Qingqing bring Cher back. He wasn't surprised at all. In the past, when Mu-yoon was on a business trip, he would look for Qingqing to take care of him. After so many years, he had long gotten used to it. In fact, Xiaoran even treated Xiaoxin like a daughter. She took 2 steps down and said softly, "Qingqing, is she asleep?" He stuck his head out to take a look and smell the alcohol. He couldn't help but ask, did she drink? Meng Qingqing saw that his wife had already changed into her pajamas, so he guessed that she must have woken up after sleeping. A warm feeling rose in his heart, and he replied, "I had 2 drinks with my classmates from school. I picked up Mu-yoon's call and brought it back on the way." He and his wife had been married for many years, but they had never had a child. It was Xiaoran's problem. She had been pregnant before, but she had habitual miscarriages. After that, he could not bear to see her suffer. Moreover, Meng Qingqing was able to suppress it. Although his family had hinted at him, he still resolved it without batting an eyelid. He had asked Xiaoran if he was willing to adopt a child. Regarding this, Xiaoran was rather indifferent, so he didn't adopt a child. Instead, they were interested in Tang Yu's child. His love for Xiaoxin, Xiaoran knew, and his dark and gloomy thoughts. He knew that Xiaoran also knew a little, but she had never said anything. Since she didn't say anything, he restrained himself more and spent more time on her. Because he had always loved Xiaoran, he didn't want her to be too sad. Xiaoran led him to the guest room next to the master bedroom. He pushed the door open and turned on the light. Inside was a warm yellow princess bedroom, Xiaoxin's exclusive bedroom. It could be seen how much Xiaoxin was doted on in the Meng family. Meng Qingqing put the doll on the bed. When he straightened up, he kissed Xiaoran and panted, "This little guy is a little heavy. Maybe I'm getting old." Xiaoran glanced at him. CEO Meng also knows that you're getting old. After they got married, she still worked at Boyi. It was just that Tang Yu didn't really handle things, so she interacted more with Meng Qingqing most of the time. However, they didn't get too close to each other in the company, and when they got home, she would occasionally call him CEO Meng with a straight face. When she called him that, Meng Qingqing wanted to teach her a lesson. Chapter 1986. Xiaoran also glanced at him and found that his eyes were a little burning. Her face was a little hot. Even though they had been married for many years, she was still a little shy about this kind of thing. Moreover, Xiaoxin was sleeping in the next room tonight. She thought that he was just having the heart, but not the courage. Xiaoran gently helped Cher wipe her little face and hands with a towel. Apart from the fact that Qingqing doted on this child, she had a good relationship with Pei Qiqi. It was impossible for her not to dote on this child. It was just that Qingqing was more or less looking after her child. She didn't have children of her own, and Xiaoxin would come to stay for a day or 2 from time to time. They were very close. Xiaoran put down the towel, lowered her head, and kissed the little girl's forehead. She dimmed the lights and went out quietly. She closed the door and paused in front of the master bedroom before pushing the door in. Meng Qingsheng had already finished showering. He was only wearing a bathrobe and leaning against the headboard with a cigarette in his hand. When he saw Xiao Ran come in, he immediately put out the cigarette. Xiao Ran walked in slowly and looked at Meng Qingsheng with a faint smile. "She's asleep. What's going on?" Meng Qingsheng reached out and motioned for her to come over. His voice was calm. A group of children playing around. Xiao Ran made an "oh" sound and put her hand on his palm. She lay down with his strength and rested her head on Meng Qingsheng's shoulder. After a moment of silence, she said, "But Mu Yun, how did he agree to it?" When she said this, Meng Qingsheng smiled and looked at his wife sideways. His voice was unbelievably gentle. "You also think it's impossible, don't you?" Xiao Ran nestled comfortably on his shoulder and said in a low voice, "She's probably making a scene. Muyin wants to make her happy, but she's drunk tonight. I'm afraid she won't be like this again in the future." After she said this, Meng Qingsheng didn't respond for a long time, so Xiao Ran raised her head. Meng Qingsheng said slowly, "Muyin can only control her for a while. Xiaoxin has grown up. She can't be under his wing forever." Xiao Ran was silent. Xiaoxin's character was actually like Tang Xin. Qingqing's worries were reasonable, and he followed his heart's desires. Even though she felt a stab of pain in her heart, how could she bicker with a little girl who had passed away? Furthermore, Tang Xin was much younger than her when she was alive. Yes, no matter what, she could not bicker with a child. She didn't make a sound and buried herself in Meng Qingqing's neck. He had drunk wine tonight, so his skin was hotter than usual and his pulse was faster as well. Mixed with the unique scent of a mature man, it was a little suffocating. Xiao Ran was a mature man's body smell. Xiao Ran was a Xiao Ran, and of her, Xiao Ran had ran. Meng Qingsheng lowered his head and looked at his wife under the warm yellow light. He turned his body slightly and lowered his voice. "What's the matter, Ran Ran?" His feelings for her were very restrained, and he would only call her like that in the middle of the night. Xiao Ran quietly hugged his sturdy waist and rubbed his face against his chest. A faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Nothing, I just feel," she nibbled on his neck. "It's so good to have you here." He was really, really good to her. Perhaps it was because he had used up all of his strength for Tang Xin, but he still couldn't make her stay. After that, even when he fell in love with her, his expression was faint, but she knew that he loved her. Otherwise, she wouldn't have the cheek to stay by his side, even though she was infertile, because he loved her. Chapter 1987. Xiao Ran had always been a very clear person, so she left everything to Meng Qingsheng. As for her, she only needed to quietly accompany him as he slowly grew old. After more than 10 years of marriage, this man seemed to have slowly changed. In the past, Meng Qingsheng could not be said to be a man who kept his chastity. Xiao Ran and he were both Tang Yu's left and right hands. It was impossible for her not to know his private affairs. After marriage, he was very restrained at first, just like a couple who had lived together for decades. They would only indulge on the weekends. However, in the past 2 years, he seemed to have changed. Usually, when he was in the mood, he did not restrain himself and fooled around as he pleased. She calculated that it was probably after his mother gave up on letting him divorce and remarry. Sometimes, Xiao Ran would secretly think that he was probably under a lot of pressure. "Qingsheng." She called his name softly. Meng Qingsheng replied and reached out to stroke her long hair. Tonight, when he saw Xiao Ran with Xiaoxin in his arms, he had already planned to have her. However, after drinking a little, he was a little lazy and tired. Not all men would be beastly after drinking. The older Meng Qingsheng was the kind of man who liked his wife to be more gentle and take the initiative after he was drunk. So, it could be said that he had been waiting for her to take the initiative. Between husband and wife, he never needed a hint. She would understand. And he was not in a hurry. The night was very long. His body temperature slowly rose. Xiao Ran reached out to poke him. then lifted her body and kissed his chin. He also pressed the back of her head, and at the same time, he pulled her up a little. One of his large palms landed on her waist and slowly touched it. It was lingering and gentle, and slowly, it made all the love jades in her body sink together. Except for the last few minutes of roughness, he was considered gentle and considerate before Xiao Ran lay in his arms. Both of them were covered in sweat, tired and satisfied. He still did not want to leave her, so he stopped her from leaving. Meng Qingqing's voice was hoarse. Lie down for a while more. I want to wash and then go see Xiaoxin. She hugged him tightly and said softly. Meng Qingqing lowered his head and kissed his wife. I'll carry you to the bathroom later. Let's go and see her together. Xiao Ran couldn't help but look up at him with a complicated expression. She was his wife. How could he not know what she was thinking? Meng Qingqing hugged her even tighter. His face was close to hers, and his voice was low. Ran, the one I love now is you, not anyone else. Even if he had loved someone else, that was in the past. As for Ran, she was really by his side. What he needed was this genuine love. Ran. Meng Qingqing kissed her lips lightly, feeling a little emotional. She had never given birth to a child, and she had been pampered all these years. Her whole body was soft and tender. He was in the prime of his life, so once was not enough. However, both of them were sweating, and she refused to do it again. Meng Qingqing could only carry her to the bathroom and coax her to do it twice more. This time, not only was she so satisfied that she didn't want to move a finger, but Meng Qingqing was also a little exhausted. After carrying her to the bedroom, he kissed her eyelids and said in a low voice, I'll go. You sleep first. He was about to straighten up when Xiao Ran suddenly grabbed one of his fingers. Her voice was very low. Qingqing. Chapter 1988. She looked at him. They were very close, so close that she could see the reflection in his eyes and his warmth. She was really tired and sleepy. She softly responded with a hum and hugged his neck. She closed her eyes and whispered, Come back soon. Meng Qingqing kissed her and tucked her in. Although Xiao Ran closed his eyes, she could feel him taking the cigarettes and lighter from the bedside table. She didn't say anything, closed her eyes gently, and fell asleep after a while. Meng Qingqing quietly looked at her for a while and quietly went out. He walked to the bedroom next door and tucked Xiaoxin in. She was a girl after all, and Xiao Ran knew that he would cover her in the middle of the night. So he changed her into pajamas so that she wouldn't feel uncomfortable. Meng Qingqing understood Xiao Ran's thoughtfulness and trust, and he felt sorry for her. Ran was a good woman. Although life with her was as ordinary as water, when one was middle-aged, didn't they need this kind of peace? In fact, it wasn't all ordinary. His wife would occasionally surprise him. She didn't say it, but he could feel it from the style of her pajamas. Occasionally, on special days, she would wear sexy pajamas with a nightgown on the outside. Only he, as her husband, knew about her beauty. Meng Qingqing stood in the hallway and smoked a few cigarettes. Today was the day Tang Xe left. She brought Xiaoxin back and slept next to them like she was their child. Meng Qingqing reached out his hand and covered his face. After so many years, he had struggled in his heart and had many dark thoughts, but they were always comforted by Xiao Ran's gentleness. Meng Qingqing smoked a few cigarettes and let the dark thoughts go. When he returned to the bedroom, he went to the bathroom to brush his teeth. Because Xiao Ran didn't like the smell of cigarettes, she couldn't let go when he kissed her with the smell of cigarettes. After all, he still had some teasing thoughts. When he lay down next to her, he pulled her into his arms. He kissed her lips and deliberately woke her up. In the dim light, Xiao Ran opened his eyes. Then, unable to bear it, he hugged his shoulder and gasped. Qingqing. She had already done it 3 times tonight. Normally, he would have let her go. It wasn't the weekend. There was no reason for him to indulge like this. Meng Qingqing's forehead was covered with sweat. As he moved, drops of sweat dripped down, scalding her so much that she moaned softly. Ran, he whispered into her ear. Actually, you've always known that I love you, right? Xiao Ran's body tensed up, and he looked dazed. Only after a while did he come back to his senses. He closed his eyes and replied softly. As for the man lying on top of her, he was probably a little beastly tonight. He didn't care about anything and kept tormenting her until late into the night. He didn't sleep much. When he woke up, he would press her down. When he was tired, he would sleep for a while and then come again. It was as though he wanted to break through the limits of his physical strength, but at the same time, it was as though he had gone crazy. That night, even though Xiao Ran's throat was sore, he didn't let her go. When dawn came, although she was exhausted, she finally remembered the reason why he was so crazy. She hugged him and whispered those 3 words in his ear. At that time, Meng Qingcheng tensed up and hugged her tightly. Ran, she had forgotten that ever since they were married for 2 years and did not have a child, she was actually cold towards him. Chapter 1989. Tonight, although it was a little childish, it could be considered that he had vented his anger. It could also be considered that he had completely forgotten about the past. What he truly grasped was happiness. Meng Qingcheng looked at the tear stains under his wife's eyes and the hickeys on her shoulder with great delight. He thought to himself a little smugly that she had been living comfortably all these years. He had always treated her gently in bed, as if he hadn't been willing to use any of those underhanded methods on her. He had played a lot in the past, but Xiao Ran was such a serious woman, so he could not do it when he looked at her. Meng Qingcheng touched his forehead and chuckled softly. He was a middle-aged man, but he had become impulsive. He did not sleep much last night, but he was still in good spirits, just that he had overdone it. After getting up and tidying up, he kissed her again and went downstairs. Cher was already sitting in the dining room downstairs. She had to go to school in a while. Meng Qingcheng sat down and asked the servants to bring some tonics over. He had become better at taking care of his health in the past 2 years. There was no other way. He was too busy with work, and his private affairs were so unrestrained. He had to take some tonics. Cher looked at him and coughed softly. Aunt Xiao hasn't woken up yet? The little girl coughed again. When I came down, I heard some movements inside, so I didn't call you uncle. Meng Qingcheng almost swallowed the tonics. He looked at Cher and blushed. What did you hear? Cher held her chin and spoke to Meng Qingcheng impolitely. It's the sound from the TV. Meng Qingcheng's face was a little green, and he could not drink the tonics in his hand. Didn't Mu Yun say that Xiaoxin was very innocent and that she did not understand these things? Cher still looked at him. Uncle Meng, why don't you drink it? You can't give Aunt Xiao happiness if you're not in good health. She blinked, and her eyes suddenly seemed to be filled with little stars. Meng Qingcheng was a little stunned for a moment. He could not tell whether the person in front of him was Cher or Tang Xian. He was stunned for a moment before he came back to his senses. He was a little annoyed. I'll throw you to your brother later. Let's see if I can still save you when he teaches you a lesson in the future. Cher immediately praised Uncle Meng for his wisdom and bravery. Meng Qingcheng ruffled her fluffy hair and suddenly said, This is very good. In the future, you must also do this in front of Mu Yun. He could tell from the start that there was something wrong with the relationship between Mu Yun and Shui. One was too strong, the other was too weak. Right now, everything seemed harmonious, but Cher would eventually grow up. It wasn't fair for Mu Yun to treat her like this. Being pampered and held in the palm of an outstanding man was a very happy thing, but being pampered too much and losing freedom was not a happy thing. Cher wasn't stupid. She was just used to being by Mu Yun's side and enjoying his care. After listening to Meng Qingcheng's words, Cher lowered her little head and said in a very low voice, I drank last night, and he came back. Her eyes were a little watery. Will he not allow me to go out again? He will. Meng Qingcheng sighed. Let him do as he pleases for now. Sometimes others could not do anything about it, because Mu Yun had already set a prison for himself 10 years ago. It was not Cher who was in prison, but Mu Yun himself. The one who had real problems in terms of personality, character was never Cher, but Mu Yun. Chapter 1990. She smiled and suddenly asked, In your heart, do you like Mu Yun? Cher looked at Meng Qingcheng in bewilderment and called out to him helplessly. No one had ever asked her such a question. She rarely asked herself if she liked him. After a long time, she said softly, "I like my brother." She really liked him, because she couldn't imagine what it would be like without him one day. "Aren't you dependent on him?" Meng Qingcheng asked casually. Cher shook her head and said softly, "He is very important to me." "That's good." Meng Qingcheng smiled and stood up. "I'll send you to school." He didn't intend to go to work today. He would come back to accompany Xiao Ran later. He had already helped her apply for leave. Cher grunted in acknowledgement. But no one expected that the person standing at the door when they walked out of the villa was Yi Muyun. His young and handsome face looked a little tired. He was wearing a formal suit, and it was obvious that he was in a hurry. Meng Qingcheng looked at him for a long time, then turned to look at Cher and sighed. "Muyun, drive slowly." "I will, Uncle Meng." Yi Muyun's tone was a little indifferent. He then stretched out his hand to Cher. "Come, I'll send you to school." Cher looked at him, pursed her lips, and walked over slowly. Then, her little head was pressed on his shoulder. Yi Muyun's voice sounded a little depressed. "All right, let's go." Cher couldn't help but turn her head and look at Meng Qingcheng. Meng Qingcheng smiled. "Don't forget what you said just now." Cher's heart skipped a beat. She looked up at Yi Muyun and pursed her lips. Yi Muyun's attitude was somewhat indecipherable. He did not get angry at her and directly brought her to the car. The car started at a high speed, and her heart was pounding. After a while, she said with difficulty, "I'm sorry." "Why are you saying sorry?" Yi Muyun steered the steering wheel with one hand and took the cigarette box with the other. He took out a cigarette and put it to his lips, taking a puff with practiced ease. He rarely smoked in front of her, and he rarely let her inhale secondhand smoke. If it was in the past, she would definitely act coquettishly and say that it was suffocating, but she didn't dare to now. Although his expression was normal, she could feel that a storm was brewing. After all, they had grown up together. She knew a little about his temper. Cher had been walking cautiously, not daring to make sound. But 10 minutes later, she realized that this wasn't the way to school but the airport. Her face was pale as she turned to look at his indifferent face. "Where are we going?" "The airport." He held the cigarette in one hand and placed it on the car window. "I'll take you to New York." Even though Cher knew that he would be angry and that she wouldn't have a good life after coming back, she had thought about it. If he wanted to hit her, she would let him. But going to New York, did that mean that he would be even stricter with her in the future? Did that mean that he would bring her along wherever he went? She was dazed for a moment, then said slowly, "I don't want to go to New York." She wasn't against being with him, but now wasn't the time. He didn't know the sharp pain at all. It was like a child who had done something wrong and then was stripped of all her freedom, all her rights, and could no longer be trusted by the adults. It was trust. Did he trust her? Trust that she had never wanted to be with someone else. Chapter 1991. At that moment, many thoughts flashed through Cher's mind. She suddenly felt that she didn't want to live like this anymore. She didn't want to continue living like this. It wasn't that she hadn't heard others say that she was a useless person, that she had always been like a little idiot, and that she was nothing other than Yi Muyun. She suddenly couldn't take it anymore and mustered her courage to resist. "I don't want to go to New York. I want to stay in B City." Yi Muyun had already extinguished the cigarette in his hand. He gripped the steering wheel with both hands, and his expression was extremely ugly. "Because of Zhou Chengwang?" Cher's eyes widened. "What did you say?" Yi Muyun tossed her a phone and said angrily, "Look at it yourself." Cher looked at him. Her fingers slowly reached out and picked up the phone to take a look. Then, her face turned pale. They were all photos of her and Zhou Chengwang together. "You sent someone to follow me?" Her breathing was a little painful as she said that. Then, she said softly, "I'm not with him." This was the first time that they were having an adult conversation. Yi Muyun's knuckles were almost white as he clenched his teeth. "Of course I know that you guys aren't together." He paused for a moment. If you were with him, he would have disappeared from this world by now. Cher's heart ached as she looked at him in disbelief. This was the first time that she felt his viciousness. He didn't even bother to hide it from her. He probably couldn't be bothered to hide it anymore. Actually, he had always been like this, ruthless. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to climb to such a position in such a short time. But in front of her, he would always be that cold and domineering brother. You're unreasonable. After a long time, she finally squeezed out a sentence with tears in her eyes. Yi Muyun's lips curled into a cold smirk. He didn't care about what she said anymore. Cher's chest heaved up and down as her temper rose. I don't want to go to New York. I want to go to school. You will follow me from now on. His voice was calm, as though he had already decided on it. When you're not in school, I will hire a tutor to teach you. Cher's blood froze. She knew all too well what this meant. In the future, she would be under house arrest. What about the future? Her voice was a little absent-minded. In the future, do I have to follow you like this for the rest of my life? Do I have to go wherever you go? Yes. He answered her without the slightest hesitation. Cher's voice suddenly turned sharp. I don't want to. I don't want this. I don't want this. Yi Muyun, do you hear me? This was the first time in her life that she had called him by his full name. Yi Muyun's face stiffened and then became even colder. You have to take it even if you don't want it. Perhaps it was because of her temper, or perhaps it was because she blurted out, I don't want you anymore. Do you hear me? The air seemed to have solidified. Yi Muyun's knuckles looked as if they were showing white bones. His face was pale, but he didn't make a sound, nor did he get angry at her. After Cher said that, she felt a little regretful. Her eyes were a little red, and there were tears in them. However, she couldn't bring herself to apologize. In the end, she could only turn her head stubbornly and look out of the window. The expensive sports car drove for more than an hour and arrived at the airport of B-City. Yi Muyun stopped the car and unbuckled his seatbelt. He said indifferently, Get out. Cher refused. She sat there and said in a dull voice, I'm not getting out. Chapter 1992. Since he wanted an explanation, she could explain it to him. Everyone went out for a meal, and I took his bike. That's all. However, her explanation was futile. Yi Muyun looked at her. I made up my mind. He did not want to talk about anything between her and Zhou Chengwang. That Zhou Chengwang liked her, and she did not know how to avoid it. Instead, she took his bike. In her heart, she felt that there was nothing wrong with that. But in Yi Muyun's case, he couldn't get past her. It was just that he did not want to say anything that would hurt her and chose not to say it. Instead, he chose to do it. In the future, she would no longer have a chance to interact with Zhou Chengwang. He said slowly, I'll arrange for Gu Zei's sister, Gu Mei, to be in the same faculty and class with you. After he said that, Cher was shocked. This was a blatant surveillance. She was no different from a prisoner. As though she had lost her voice, she took in a deep breath and looked at him. After a long time, Cher asked softly, Are you sure you want to do this? This time around, Yi Muyun did not reply her and got off the bike. He walked to her side and opened the door. Cher refused to get off the bike, so he bent down to unbuckle her seatbelt. I don't want to, she screamed as he carried her up horizontally. Punching and kicking didn't work. She could only scream desperately and bite his shoulder, biting it hard. She started to cry. Brother, I don't want to do this. She knew that he would be angry after seeing those photos. She could apologize. She really did not like Zhou Chengwang. She was probably too happy that she was free like a bird that was released. She was just happy because Zhou Chengwang did not express anything to her. She thought that there was nothing shameful and that she did not like anyone else. But why was her brother treating her like this? She had never begged him so humbly before. I'll get the chauffeur to pick me up every day. I won't go out or eat with anyone else. I'll be good, all right? She cried like a little kitten and was out of breath in his arms. Yi Muyun's face was stiff, and he did not look good. After all, he had worked in New York for a day before flying back to B-City. Now, he was flying back to New York again. He had not slept for nearly 30 hours. Now that she was in such a mess, the anger in his heart grew. Ignoring her little feelings, he directly pressed her down and carried her to the private plane. Gu Zei waited in the private jet. Looking at the couple, he sighed in his heart. Boss was really deeply affectionate, but Cher had been protected by him to this extent. Could she understand his love? The private plane took off immediately. Amidst the rumbling sound, Cher was a little sluggish. She sat on the spacious sofa and didn't come back to her senses for a long time. Suddenly, she looked at Yi Muyun, who was already handling official business, and said blankly, "What am I?" Was she his prisoner? Did it belong to him? He could make all the decisions for her and take it for granted, as though she was born to him. But he wouldn't even listen to a single explanation. Did he like her, love her, or treat her as a little pet? Cher started to feel that she was a human and not his pet. She had seen her parents together, Uncle Meng and Annie Xiao together, and Annie Pei Huan and Uncle Qin together. None of them got along like her and her brother. They wouldn't control the person they liked like this. Only she couldn't do anything. Chapter 1993. Cher murmured, "I don't want to go to New York." She looked at him and said in a hoarse voice, "I don't want to go to New York. Do you hear me?" Yi Muyun was discussing business with Gu Zhe. He was already a little tired and rubbed his eyebrows. "Cher, stop it." He raised his hand and called Gu Mei over. "Take her to the bedroom to rest and give her a glass of milk." When he said milk, his tone became heavier. Gu Mei's heart skipped a beat, and she asked hesitantly, "Mr. Yi, let her sleep." Yi Muyun's tone was indifferent. From their conversation, Cher guessed that he was going to give her sleeping pills. Her face turned pale. "Yi Muyun, I don't want." She had said no too many times today, and he seemed to have lost his patience. He raised his hand and asked someone to bring the milk over to feed her. She refused and spilled the milk all over his expensive trousers. However, he didn't even blink and said coldly, "Bring another cup over." Cher screamed and struggled. "I don't want to drink it. I don't want to sleep." She even scolded him harshly and even said some things that she herself didn't know. At this moment, she seemed to have gone crazy and wanted to go against him. Yes, she didn't want to listen to him. Why should she listen to him? He was too hateful. However, her waist was held by him. He held her tightly, not giving her a chance to struggle. The second glass of milk was soon brought over. Yi Muyun held her easily with one hand and held the glass of milk with the other. He looked at her indifferently. "Do you want to drink it yourself, or do you want me to do it?" "I don't want to drink it." Cher was tired from struggling. Her ponytail was loose, and her forehead was covered in sweat. Her eyes were a little dazed, and she was panting slightly in the crook of his arm. He was too strong, and she was too weak. That glass of milk was fed by him, mouthful by mouthful. Yi Muyun's movements were slow and unhurried, but they were filled with ruthlessness. Gu Zhe and Gu Mei, who were watching from the side, felt a chill in their hearts. They wanted to say something, but they didn't dare to. After feeding her a glass of milk, Cher had already fallen asleep. Her eyelids were slightly swollen and pink from crying, and there were 2 drops of tears on her long eyelashes. She looked obedient and cute, but in the future, it would be hard for her to be obedient. Yi Muyun lowered his head and looked at her silently for a long time. He got up and carried her to the bedroom and gently put her down. She lay perfectly soft beside him on the bed, but something was different. "Should I not have agreed to let you go in the first place?" He bent one leg and half knelt beside her. His slender and beautiful fingers gently caressed her little face, his voice extremely hoarse. But she could not hear him. Her heart was full of indignation, and she could not feel his pain. His pain, his happiness, she never knew. She did not know how important she was to him. She did not know how angry he was when he saw those photos. His face was slightly cold. She did not need to know. She only needed to stay in his arms peacefully. That was enough. Outside, Gu Mei looked at Gu Zhe and said softly, "Brother, don't you think Mr. Ye's love is too stubborn?" Gu Zhe smiled faintly and looked at Gu Mei. "Maybe, but they will be together." Because they liked each other. Gu Mei was a few years younger than Gu Zhe and was a genius. She was about the same age as Yi Muyun and was now a top talent under Yi Muyun. But no one in Boyi knew the meaning of Gu Mei's existence, because she did nothing but follow beside Yi Muyun. Chapter 1994. She didn't agree with Gu Zhe. "Brother, I can't stand it if a man treats me like this." Gu Zhe bent his well-defined fingers and knocked on his sister's head. He smiled. "That's why they're suitable. With Yi Muyun's personality, He didn't need a capable wife. What he wanted was a gentle little person who could make him happy. And Shui was the most suitable person for him. The friction now was only because they were too young and hadn't found a way to get along. Perhaps Gu Mei was right. Mr. Ye's love was too stubborn. As the siblings were talking, Yi Muyun walked out, looking slightly tired. He sat on the sofa and looked at Gu Zhe. Bring the documents over. Gu Zhe hesitated. Mr. Yi, do you want to take a break? No need. Yi Muyun didn't have any expression on his face. He sat down and discussed business with Gu Zhe. Gu Mei thought to herself, cold-blooded devil. Could it be that Cher was ignoring him and not following him? She didn't have much contact with Cher before, but there would be in the future. She would have to accompany the genius girl in her studies. She had been poached over by Yi Muyun to work on high-end technology. Now, she was wasting her talent. Gu Mei very naturally explained to herself that it was because she was young and cute, and that she was suitable to accompany the younger and prettier cutie, Cher. Gu Mei's self-esteem was satisfied with this thought. Yi Muyun and Gu Zhe had been working. Occasionally, he would use the satellite phone to talk to the United States. This time back to City B, his work rhythm was all messed up, and his body was at its limit. When he arrived in New York, he still couldn't rest. There was an important meeting waiting for him. He didn't think it was very tiring. The most tiring thing was his little girl. She was so fierce now. Just thinking about it made his head hurt. Half an hour before the plane landed, he finished his work and got up to go to the bedroom. Gu Zhe heaved a sigh of relief. Mr. Yi didn't care about his life, but he was also fucked to death. At this moment, he could already predict how miserable it would be later. Gu Mei threw a sympathetic look at him. The elder brother glanced at her and said, "Pack up. The plane has begun to descend." Gu Mei nodded. Yi Muyun opened the door and found that Cher had woken up. She was leaning against the headboard of the bed. She looked weak and beautiful because she was in a daze. She looked to the side, and it was impossible to tell what she was thinking. "We're going to land in a while. Are you hungry?" He walked in and sat beside her, sighing. "Will you listen to me?" She didn't make a sound. He slowly turned her little face over and placed it on his shoulder. "I'll get someone to send some food over." She was still silent. After he pressed the intercom to get someone to send a simple meal, she then said in a low voice, "Am I going to live like this for the rest of my life?" His heart skipped a beat. Shui lifted her little face from his shoulder. Her gaze was unfamiliar to him. "Am I not allowed to say a single word to anyone? Do I have to stay in the place you've marked out for me every day? Do I only have you in my world? Yi Muyun, am I right?" His heart trembled slightly. At this moment, who said that his Cher was stupid? She was very smart. The little girl had grown up and knew how to resist. Chapter 1995. Cher had always been a naive and innocent girl in front of him, but that didn't mean that she didn't know anything. Her eyes searched for his, and then she stared into his eyes and asked very slowly, "How many children should we have?" Yi Muyun's fingers loosened slightly. He lowered his head and pressed his forehead against hers. His voice was gentle as he said, "Let's have two. It's best if it's a boy and a girl." With that said, the little body in his arms stiffened. Cher laughed lightly. "Look, you've even thought about this." She slowly withdrew from his arms, her face as pale as snow. "Yi Muyun, my life is already yours, isn't it?" He frowned. His hand that was hanging in the air dropped. He was a little frustrated and wanted to smoke, but he couldn't. Finally, he stood up and stood by the window, looking at the clouds outside. Once, she was like a cloud in the sky to him. She was so young, and so was he. She came from a good family, and her parents loved each other. Back then, he only had a broken life. She had no idea how much effort he had put in, and how much he had walked to be able to stand by her side so naturally. He and her has always been he looked up to her. But she didn't know. He didn't intend to let her know in the future. Yi Muyun stood there for a long time before he said in a hoarse voice, "I thought that our lives belonged to each other." She said that her world needed more excitement, but there was no one else in his world, only her. Ever since he came to the Tang family, she was the only one in his world. After Yi Muyun said that, he didn't say anything else. He wasn't someone who was good at being submissive. Moreover, He had always been the one giving orders in front of her. Cher bit her lip and didn't say a word. She hugged her knees and lowered her eyes. Outside the door, Gumei came in with a simple meal. Seeing the situation, she grabbed her long curly hair and said uncomfortably, "I'm here to deliver the food. The plane will land in 20 minutes. She reminded them out of goodwill. If they were going to quarrel, it was better to have some dignity when they were outside. Cher looked up at Gumei. She knew Gumei, and Gumei would follow her in the future. Towards this, she had an indescribable resistance in her heart. It was not that she hated Gumei, but she hated Yi Muyun's arrangements. She didn't say anything. Yi Muyun stood by the window and said calmly, "Put it down." Gumei was sensible. She immediately put down the food and ran out. Guzei looked at her, and she mouthed, quarreled. In the bedroom, Yi Muyun suppressed his anger. He walked to the bed and sat down. He picked up the food box with one hand and said, "Eat." Shui'er didn't move, so he scooped up some food and brought it to her lips. "If you don't eat, you'll have to wait for 24 hours before you can eat again. Are you sure you can wait that long?" Cher wanted to be unyielding and not eat, but she thought that she would starve to death if she didn't eat for 24 hours. In the end, she still ate without a backbone. Yi Muyun looked at her with a burning gaze and continued to feed her. Before the plane landed, she ate everything. After eating, she calmed down a little. Kneeling on the bed, she looked up at him and said softly, "Brother, I'll take the chauffeur's car from now on. I'll go home on time from school, okay?" She even took the initiative to hug his waist and put her face on his chest, begging in a small voice. Chapter 1996. She knew that she didn't want to lose him, so she was willing to explain and admit her mistake. Yi Muyun lowered his head and looked at the soft little girl. This was the first time she showed that she cared about him. Although she didn't say it directly, that was what she meant. His heart softened and he rubbed her hair. "Let's stay like this for a while." Cher pursed her lips and didn't continue begging. There were only two paths in front of her. One was to continue to quarrel with him, which would result in her not having freedom. The other was to break up. Break up was a strange word to her. Her heart was very complicated. Yi Muyun was very naturally in her world, and she had never thought of asking him to back out. So she begged him. He seemed to have given in, so she didn't resist anymore. After everything calmed down, she seemed to have become an obedient child again. Yi Muyun rubbed her hair and carried her out. "I'll walk by myself." Cher struggled for a while, but Yi Muyun didn't let go. He patted her. "Behave yourself. I'm a little tired now." He was still hugging her when he was tired. Her voice was filled with complaints. Yi Muyun looked at her and smiled faintly. His smile was like a spring breeze. It blinded Gumei's eyes. She looked at him and then looked at Guzei. She swallowed her saliva. That's it. Could the speed of reconciliation be faster than the speed of light? They were already quarreling like this. How could it be over after a nap and a meal? Guzei smiled. "Relationships are different from your experiments." He stretched out his finger and shook it gently. "It's full of unknowns and variability." Gumei followed beside him. Cher gave in just like that. Guzei paused and looked at his sister. He pondered for a while. It should be that both of them took a step back. They alighted from the plane. Gumei brought Cher back to the hotel, while Yi Muyun and Guzei went straight to the company. By the time he finished his work and returned, it was already 8 hours later. His little sweetheart was lying on the big bed in his hotel room, sleeping soundly like a child. In fact, she was still a child, so small and soft. Yi Muyun looked at her, and the exhaustion in his body seemed to be soothed. He reached out to take off his tie, unbuttoned his shirt, and took off everything he had. His handsome face was a little depressed. Instead of kissing her, he went to the bathroom to rinse off. After all, he was a 20-year-old young man. When he was at his peak, he only needed to take a shower to recover most of his energy. When he came out, he was already refreshed. He poured himself a glass of red wine and drank it. He stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window at the highest point of the GM Hotel, overlooking the entire land. Slowly drinking the wine in the glass, he moved to the side of the bed, lifted the blanket, and laid down beside the little girl. Her body was fragrant and soft, exuding the unique fragrance of a young girl, causing people to become restless. Moreover, he was in the prime of his youth. Even though he hadn't slept for nearly 40 hours, he was still restless. He closed his eyes and looked at the little girl. Finally, he swept the little girl into his arms and closed his eyes to sleep. After a while, he fell asleep while smelling the faint milky fragrance on her body. There was a slight smile on his lips. 18 years old and still had the milky smell. There was no one else except for the milk yolk bun. Chapter 1997. Yi Muyun was a very disciplined person. She only slept for 6 hours and woke up the next morning when the sky was just starting to brighten. He didn't get up immediately. He just looked at the little pig sleeping soundly in his arms. She was afraid of the cold, so she curled up his arms and curled into a small ball. Yi Muyun leaned against the headboard and didn't do anything. He just looked at her beautiful face. It wasn't that he didn't want to, but he wanted her to sleep a little longer. He always felt that children needed to sleep more when they were growing up. He just looked at her like that. It wasn't until 7:30 a.m. that Cher woke up. When she opened her eyes, she saw the man's muscular body in his bathrobe. Cher was a little dazed. She buried herself in his arms again and took a deep breath before asking softly, "Aren't you going to get up?" Although she was afraid of him, she was usually a little confused and clingy when she woke up. She liked to hug him and even liked it when he switched places with her. Just like now, her limbs were wrapped around him and her face was placed on his chest. She seemed to have forgotten how domineering he was and just wanted to sleep on his body for a while longer. Yi Muyun reached out and gently stroked her long hair. She was so comfortable that she squinted her eyes and hummed softly like a kitten. Then, her whole body lay in his arms. Suddenly, her body froze. It was impossible for a 20-year-old man to not have any reaction when he had a girl he liked lying in his arms in the early morning. At this moment, she could clearly feel the changes in his body. She was a little flustered and tried to push herself up, but the more she did, the more she pressed herself against him, and the tighter she clung to him. "Brother." Her voice was helpless. She was crying and begging him. His eyes darkened. He looked at her silently for a long time. Suddenly, he pressed the back of her head and kissed her lips forcefully. The kiss was lingering and forceful. It went beyond his usual limits. At this moment, he wasn't kissing a girl. He was kissing a woman he had loved for many years. All the passion in his heart was unleashed in this kiss. His hot breath made her tremble in fear. His body temperature was so hot that she almost jumped up. However, she didn't. She could only soften her body and accept the kiss. The way he treated her seemed to be different, as if he had no scruples. Her pajamas were spread open. She wanted to cover herself, but he did not allow it. He admired her inch by inch under the morning sun, worshiping her. In the end, she cried until her eyelids were pink. He seemed to have woken up from a dream and leaned against her neck to calm himself down. After a while, his voice was very soft. Afraid? Just now. He had almost taken her, really possessed her. She, on the other hand, was not that mature yet. He leaned against her neck for a while to calm down, but his blood was still boiling. He hesitated for a moment before he propped himself up. "I'm going to the bathroom." His voice was especially hoarse, but she blushed and turned her face away, not daring to look at him. Her cheeks were rosy, which made him pinch her cheeks. Then, he lifted the blanket and went straight to the bathroom. She thought he was going to wash his face and brush his teeth. After all, it was time for him to get up. However, she had something to say to him. After some thought, she walked to the bathroom door and opened it. "I have something to do." She couldn't finish her sentence because what he was doing completely stunned her. Chapter 1998. Yi Muyun leaned against the wall lazily. He was initially enjoying himself with his eyes closed. When she came in, he was confused for a moment, but he quickly pulled her over and held her tightly in his arms. "Let go of me." Cher did not dare to look at him in his arms. She did not dare to look at his body, his expression, and his gaze. Everything was shameful. Yi Muyun looked at her tightly shut eyes and laughed in a low voice. "Baby, open your eyes and take a look." "I don't want to." Her voice was trembling as she closed her eyes even more tightly. He laughed even more wantonly as he teased her. "Baby, just take a look." His thin lips moved closer to her ear, and his voice was hoarse. "Baby, do you know what Big Brother is doing?" As he said that, he even grabbed her little hand and let her experience it herself. Cher let out a shrill scream. This was the first time he had ever treated her like this. He had never done it before. She was terrified and panicked. She retracted her little hand and refused to, but this time, he refused to let her go. He bit her little ear and coaxed her. "Help Big Brother, huh?" "No, I don't want to." She was no different from a kitten. She shook her head and even cried. But his bad habits were completely provoked. Coupled with her disobedience, he grabbed her little hand without a care and forced her to do shameful things. Even when she cried and begged, he did not let her go. He only hugged her when he was satisfied. After he calmed down, he began to coax her. But the little girl was angry and would not forgive him so easily. She lay on his shoulder and bit him hard. Yimuyun chuckled. He knew that the little girl was angry. He pulled a tissue from his side and wiped her little hand. Then, he pulled her into the shower. Another first. She refused and cried miserably. Because she did not want to stand with him naked. She would be seen naked. Even if they would do shameful things in the future, that would be in the future. She really could not accept it now. She kept throwing a tantrum and crying miserably. In the end, he had no choice but to fill the bathtub with water and soak her in. She shyly took off her pajamas and put in a lot of bubbles until she could no longer be seen. As for him, he took a shower. She didn't dare to look at him, and her face was lowered. She only glanced at him once and didn't dare to look at him again. She only knew that his body was very strong and also very scary. Yes, it was too scary. Cher bit her lip. Her eyes seemed to be filled with tears as she sneaked a peek at him again. He was clearly very lean, but why was it that in some aspects she felt a little scared just by looking at him? According to the book, it had to be this and that, and this and that. She felt that if it was really like that, she would die of pain. Even now, her little palm was still burning hot, as if a layer of skin had been rubbed off. Yimuyun was ready very quickly and walked over without any hesitation. In his heart, he already had a plan. On her birthday, he proposed and took her. He wouldn't wait any longer because he couldn't bear the fact that she wasn't his. Now, he hoped that she could adapt to him and not be afraid when the time came. He squatted at the edge of the bathtub and stared at her little face. You have to get used to it in the future. He wouldn't let it go just because he had taken her once. They would do it often in the future. He didn't want to scare her. Chapter 1999. Although the excessive work consumed a portion of his energy, he still had to go to the gym a few times a week to use up his excess energy. Yimuyun's slender fingers stroked her red lips gently. He thought to himself, once a man has started, he probably can't restrain himself anymore. Moreover, he didn't want to restrain himself anymore. He wanted her so much that his body ached. She didn't know how many imaginations he had in his mind, even though only her shoulders were exposed in the bathtub. Yimuyun traced her lips gently. As she trembled, he said in a hoarse voice, "Shall I carry you up?" "No." She hugged her own body in an instant. Lowering her face, she said softly, "Go out first." However, he didn't move. He remained dangerously by the bathtub and moved his finger downwards from her mouth. She trembled even more violently. She looked up at him and called out, "Brother," again. He reached out and carried her forcefully, walking straight to the bedroom. He dressed her as if he was taking care of a baby in a perverted manner. His actions were very slow and unhurried. Moreover, his gaze was fixed on her throughout the entire process. She couldn't take it anymore. She closed her eyes and didn't dare to look at him. He whispered in her ear, "Afraid of me, huh?" Cher trembled even more. She buried her face in the pillow and didn't make a sound. He helped her change into a thin woolen dress. Patting her, he turned around to change his clothes. He didn't avoid her. He took out some clothes from the changing room and put them by the bed. He removed the towel and changed. Cher curled up at the head of the bed and hugged her knees. She bit her lip. Actually, She could feel the change between them. It seemed like he didn't want to wait for her to grow up. She had this realization, which meant that she had actually grown up. "You're not afraid anymore?" Yimuyun's tone was indifferent as he looked at her. Cher bit her lip and turned her face away. Her little face was filled with the eyes of an 18-year-old. She didn't make a sound. He only smiled and didn't force her. After all, there was still a month before her birthday. He had already started preparing for her birthday. By then, he would truly have her. Yimuyun had an important meeting in the morning, so he had to go to the company after breakfast with her. Breakfast was relatively pleasant. Even when she asked him when she would be returning to B-City, he did not get angry. He only said that his work would end in 5 days. Cher heaved a sigh of relief. She planned to fight for it slowly after she returned to B-City. Even if it was the same as before, he and the chauffeur could pick her up. She could skip any activities and go home obediently. She could not stand Gumei following her to school. It was not that she hated Gumei, but it was tantamount to surveillance. She was smart enough not to bring it up immediately. Instead, she obediently lifted her eyes and allowed him to kiss her on the lips. "If I wasn't afraid that you'd be bored, I would take you to the office." His lips pressed against hers as he whispered. Then he stared at her. Xiaoxin felt a lot of pressure and coughed lightly. "Actually, I prefer to watch movies in the hotel." He didn't force her to go to the office with him because she could only sleep there. He would rather make her happy. However, he asked Gumei to stay with her. He and Guze wouldn't leave. After they left, Gumei lay on the sofa on the other side and waved at her. "Cher, why do you like such a boring man? He's always working and working." Chapter 2000. Gumei thought that Yi Muyun was only 20 years old. Wasn't a little too much for him to be the vice president of a multinational company? What fun was there in working all day at such a young age? However, thinking about it, the only fun Yi Muyun had was probably Cher. Look at Cher. If Gumei were a man, she wouldn't want to go out either. She would rather be with her all day. Gumei asked. Cher lay on her stomach and thought about it before saying softly, "I don't know. It seems like it was a long time ago." She stuck out her tongue. "I used to hate him." She was more afraid because her brother always looked like he wanted to eat her up. She was so young back then. How could she not be afraid? Gumei kept smiling. That's right. It was very difficult for a woman to like a man like Yi Muyun. It wasn't because he wasn't outstanding, but because he was too outstanding. There would be a sense of oppression. Women who liked him would examine themselves all day long, wondering if they had done something wrong, if they weren't worthy of him. They were afraid that even if they liked him, they would have already driven themselves crazy before they could achieve their goal. However, Cher didn't have such pressure. Between her and the big boss, the one who would drive herself crazy might be the big boss. Yi Muyun loved her to the point of being a little paranoid, and he was just stuck in it without knowing it. However, Cher was silent. She lay on her stomach for a long time, without making a sound. At the same time, Yi Muyun was in the middle of a meeting in the New York conference room of Boyi Group. Suddenly, his phone rang. The phone belonged to Cher, and the number was unknown. He remembered that there was no one else in her phone other than her family and him. Pursing his thin lips, he gestured for Guze to continue hosting the meeting. He took her phone and walked out of the conference room. The senior executives who stayed behind looked at each other. Mr. Yi had never acted like this before. Guze knew what was going on. He didn't say anything and continued hosting the meeting. When Yi Muyun opened the door, he answered the phone at the same time. His tone was rather calm. "I'm Yi Muyun." With that, he opened the door, leaned against the wall of the corridor outside the door, took out a cigarette, put it to his lips, and lit it. The person on the other side paused for a moment. Although he didn't speak immediately, he could tell from his breathing that it was a man. As for who it was, there was no need to ask anymore. Yi Muyun's long eyelashes drooped. His watery eyes suddenly seemed to have limitless sharpness, especially the faint red mole at the corner of his eye, which made his sharp aura seem a little gentler. Both sides were silent for a moment, and then he said, "Zhou Chengguang." "Yes, I'm looking for Tang Cher." Zhou Chengguang didn't show any stage fright in the face of such an imposing manner and directly stated his purpose. Yi Muyun smiled faintly raised his neck slightly, and took a long and shallow puff of the cigarette. He was young after all, and his skin was as fair as jade. His posture was actually very attractive, but fortunately, no subordinate saw it. She's in New York, so there's no need for her to answer your call. Also, she won't participate in any activities in the future. Yi Muyun was quite straightforward. In the future, Zhou Chengwang would have no reason to look for Cher. Zhou Chengwang was stunned for a moment, and then he couldn't calm down. He was a little angry. You call this house arrest? Do you think you really love her? There's no need to explain to outsiders. There was a hint of displeasure in Yi Muyun's voice. Stay away from her, or else I can't guarantee that Glory Enterprise will be safe and sound. Chapter 2001. Zhou Chengwang was young after all. He didn't know anything about Yi Muyun's ruthlessness. He was slightly annoyed. You don't have the right to treat her like this. She deserves the respect she deserves. However, Yi Muyun had already hung up. Zhou Chengwang looked at his phone in a daze. He could feel that Yi Muyun had a perverted possessiveness towards Tang Cher. However, was this something a girl should bear? He didn't think so. Zhao Zi patted his shoulder and shook his head. Forget it. There are plenty of fish in the sea. Zhou Chengwang looked at Zhao Zi with a stunned expression. She's in New York. She was taken away because of a meal. Yi Muyun's feelings were so strong that it was scary. Chengwang, you can't get involved. They have a 10-year relationship. Zhao Zi stopped joking. Even if Tang Cher cries and begs to be with you, Yi Muyun won't let go. The two of them would definitely be together. Only Chengwang would be hurt, and he could see it clearly. He didn't want Chengwang to be hurt because of this. He had a bright future. Zhou Chengwang pursed his lips and sighed. Z, this is the first time I've liked a girl so much. No, not just like. He murmured. I can't bear to. Zhao Zi patted him and said, it's a consensual thing. Besides, he paused for a moment before saying, even if you want to be with her, you have to wait for them. If they break up, you'll be a homewrecker. It was hard to imagine a proud person like Zhou Chengwang being associated with a homewrecker. Zhao Zi looked at Zhou Chengwang after saying that. Zhou Chengwang said in a low voice, I want to go to New York. Zhao Zi's mouth opened wide in disbelief. It took him a long time to find his voice. Chengwang, are you possessed? You've only known her for a few days. Zhou Chengwang's voice was faint. Z, I know what you're thinking, but for me, if I don't go, I won't be satisfied. In New York, Yi Muyun looked at the phone in his hand. After a while, he deleted the call history. Take Zhou Chengwang, for example. Between him and Cher, he wasn't that important, but he was annoying. Stepping into the conference room again, the subordinates could clearly feel that Mr. Ye's style of hosting the meeting was much sharper. Guze glanced at him nonchalantly, guessing in his heart it was probably because of the little girl. After the meeting, Guze followed Yi Muyun back to the office. Yi Muyun's tone was indifferent. Bring me the documents of Glory Enterprise in B City. Guze's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't help but say, Mr. Yi. Of course, he knew why Yi Muyun was using Glory Enterprise. He was probably using his position to get back at him. What is it? Yi Muyun held a cigarette in one hand, turned on his laptop, and looked at Guze indifferently. Guze shrugged and immediately went to get the documents. In less than 10 minutes, he brought them over with both hands. He had thought that Mr. Yi would discuss it with him, but Yi Muyun only said indifferently, put it on the table. Guze was puzzled. Was Mr. Yi going to do it himself? But he didn't ask and quickly left. After he left, Yi Muyun stretched out her hand and picked up the document. She swept her gaze over it and looked at it quietly. After a long time, a faint sneer appeared on her lips. Chapter 2002. But in the end, he still threw the documents into the drawer and ignored it. When he returned to the hotel, he did not see Cher. He called Gume, and Gume told him that she had brought Cher out for some ice. Ice? Wasn't the weather cold? He tore off his tie slowly and asked for the address before driving over. In the dessert shop, Cher had a huge banana split in front of her. She was digging and eating like a child. Gume was amazed. She pinched the flesh on the young girl's arm and drooled. You're such a horrible eater, and yet you're so skinny. God is unfair. Not only was she skinny, but she was also very attractive in certain areas. She was really blessed by the heavens. Gume could imagine how a beast like Yi Mu-yun would be beastly when he looked at such a sweetheart. Cher looked up and said slowly, I was very fat when I was young. She remembered that when she was young, Yi Mu-yun used to call her a little yellow bun, saying that she was fat. Oh, Gume replied. Her gaze landed on Cher's neck again. It was so tender that she wanted to take a bite. Cher finally had a meal and naturally couldn't bear to let it go. She ate until her mouth was all over the place. At this moment, someone rubbed the back of her head. She looked back instinctively and saw Yi Mu-yun. It was only noon. Why wasn't he at the office? Cher looked at him curiously as she dug into the dessert. There are 2 hours of rest in the afternoon, Yi Mu-yun said casually. Gume secretly made a face. Of course not. Boss was also very busy in the afternoon before, okay? But Cher believed that he was very free. Yi Mu-yun sat down and called the waiter over. He was prepared to have some food on the spot. It seemed like she wasn't going to move. He was still very tolerant of such little hobbies, especially when she ate. It was very cute. He looked at the menu and frowned. Fortunately, there were simple meals here. He ordered 2 simple dishes and asked Gume. Gume shrugged her shoulders. Me too. Just as Yi Mu-yun was about to speak to the waiter, Cher scooted over and rested her little face on his shoulder. She said pitifully, Big brother, I want to eat some butter. Yi Mu-yun looked at the dessert in front of her and frowned. Can you eat it? Cher didn't say anything. She just stared at him. She couldn't even have dessert when he brought her to New York. Angry. Yi Mu-yun tilted his head and looked at the little face on his shoulder. He snorted softly. Have you forgotten about the stomach ache last time? It was a cold. It had nothing to do with dessert. Cher blinked her big eyes and stared at him. In the end, the elder brother gave in. Yi Mu-yun closed the menu in his hand and reached out to pinch her soft little face. He smiled faintly. Okay. His slender fingers reached out to wipe the corner of her mouth, and the little girl immediately wagged her tail happily after getting the new dessert. Gume was stunned. She had seen many lovers, but this was the first time she had seen one like this. And Cher lowered her head and finished her dessert at an incredible speed. Then she waited anxiously for the new dessert. At this moment, Yi Mu-yun and Gume's simple meal arrived. He didn't eat it immediately, but forced Cher to eat some. Cher's eyes were filled with tears. She touched her little belly. She was full. Brother is bad. Yi Mu-yun fed her enough before he ate himself. Her dessert was also served. Chapter 2003. Gume looked at her, lying on Yi Mu-yun's shoulder like a little bear, and was a little worried. Mr. Yi, is Cher okay? Cher raised her little paw. Gume, I need to digest. Her voice was weak. Yi Mu-yun frowned. Are you feeling unwell? Actually, she was feeling unwell, but she didn't dare to say it. She shook her head. No. He looked at her. His gaze was a little deep, and there was a faint spark. Gume said knowingly, Then I'll go take a walk first. Mr. Yi, you can send Cher back to the hotel later. Yi Mu-yun nodded lightly. Gume made a face at Cher and left first. Once she left, Cher wanted to say something, but her little face was turned to face him. He sighed. Little fool. With that said, he kissed her. It wasn't a deep kiss, but it was a lingering one. After all, she was a little shy outside. Her body was curled up in his arms, and she was forced to raise her little face to be kissed by him. He kissed her for a while before letting go of her. Her eyes were already filled with infatuation. Good girl, he said hoarsely. His slender and beautiful fingers caressed her lips. It was a little seductive. Cher's face was a little hot. She felt that there was a deeper meaning behind his caressing her lips, so she buried her face in his arms and refused to come out. Yi Mu-yun laughed softly. He lowered his head and buried it in her neck. He asked in a low voice, not angry anymore. Her little hands were hugging his waist. In fact, she was already in his arms, looking very intimate. Still angry. She pursed her lips and lowered her head. What's the use of being angry? She was still locked up in New York and couldn't go back. How could Yi Mu-yun not know what the little girl was thinking? He chuckled. Didn't she come over to accompany you in the afternoon? She looked up. She was afraid of him, but she couldn't help but say, "There was dessert to accompany me, and Gume." Yi Muyun's voice was slightly hoarse. "Gume, can I kiss you like this?" She blushed and lowered her head. Her little hand hooked onto his. Although she did not speak, he knew that she did not want to talk about this outside. She would be shy. He didn't force her. He reached out and stroked her hair. "I'll take you back to the hotel." Actually, she wanted to go shopping with Gume today, but he came and Gume left. She could only go back to the hotel with him. When they arrived at the hotel, he still had an hour. Yi Muyun coaxed her to sleep, but Cher was being hugged by a mature man. How could she fall asleep? Moreover, she realized that he had no intention of booking another room for her. She wanted to say it, but did not dare to, so they had to sleep in the same bed for the entire week. Yi Muyun's little body moved around. He opened his eyes and asked, "Why aren't you sleeping?" She leaned on him, her face pressed against his waist, and whispered, "You're hugging me a little too tightly." He chuckled. "If you can't sleep, then don't sleep." She was still in a daze. He had already hugged her and kissed her. He had wanted to do this when they were outside. Recently, he had been kissing her without restraint. He didn't care if it would ignite the fire in his body as he kissed her deeply. She was forced to cry by him. She cried softly and cried no, because he was holding her hand again, forcing her to do those things to him. She was crying so hard that he couldn't bear to do it anymore. He coaxed her softly, and as he coaxed her, she fell asleep. Yi Muyun looked at her sleeping face. He couldn't help but hold her little hand. Chapter 2004. He could naturally feel that it was getting harder and harder for him to control his emotions. Perhaps it was because her birthday was getting closer and closer, or perhaps it was because she was getting better and better. After he had completely calmed down, he lifted his body slightly, kissed her, and walked into the bathroom to take a shower. He had a meeting to attend in the afternoon, so he had to return to the office. He whispered into her ear, "Baby, I'm leaving first. I'll be back at 6 for dinner, okay?" She was sleeping soundly. She waved her hand and slapped him on the face with a loud smack. Yi Muyun was stunned for a moment. Then he smiled and didn't think much of it. He liked it when she was like this. He liked it when they got along without any barriers. He didn't like it when she was afraid of him. At this moment, his heart was burning. He lowered his body and kissed her little face. Even though she couldn't hear him, he felt an indescribable warmth in his heart as he spoke. When he left, his heart was still boiling. However, before the meeting ended, Gume called and said that Cher had acute gastroenteritis and was now in the hospital. Yi Muyun was not in the mood to continue with his work. He did not rush to a private hospital, so Guze took his place to host the meeting. When he arrived at the hospital, his condition was better than he had expected. It was just a little inflammation. He should be fine after 2 days of 4 drips. When he saw her, the nurse was about to give her an 4 drip. The little girl had tears in her eyes and was biting her lips pitifully. Yi Muyun walked over and leaned against the headboard. Cher sobbed and leaned on his shoulder. She said in a weak voice, "Brother, I don't want an injection." He knew that she had always been afraid of pain, just like Pei Chi-Chi. He reached out and pressed her shoulder, coaxing her. "It won't hurt if you poke it. It hurts." She wasn't a fool. She knew that he loved her, so she kept on acting, and he could only keep on coaxing her. Gume had heard from her brother how much Mr. Yi doted on his little girlfriend. She thought it was just like any other person. But now, she had a feeling that although the two of them were only 2 years apart, it was obvious that Mr. Yi doted on Cher like a daughter. That was why he was so overbearing. Gume did not understand how complicated this feeling was. At this time, Yi Muyun comforted the young girl and gave the nurse a look. The nurse quickly inserted the needle. Then, Gume heard a pig-like squeal. What beautiful girl! What little fairy! They were all gone. There was only howling like a pig being slaughtered. Gume was stunned at first, then she smiled sinisterly. She looked at Yi Muyun and cleared her throat. "Mr. Yi, Cher seems to be afraid of pain." She cried like this after being pricked by a needle. Tears and mucus were flying everywhere. If it was her first time with Mr. Yi, this was much thicker than a needle and also much more violent. Wouldn't he cry to death? Whenever Gu Mei thought of Yun being stuck in the middle, unable to move up or down, she laughed in her heart. Yun glared at her for harboring ill intentions, but her expression was a little disheveled. Yes, he was so petty and afraid of pain. Usually, he cried like this when he bit her neck. If that was really the case, how would he cry? Just thinking about it now made him feel endless distress. And the little girl in his arms howled for a long time after being pricked by the needle. Finally, she lost all her strength and fell asleep in his arms, tired and sleepy. Chapter 2005. It was Yun's endless love that gave Cher a sense of security. That was why she could sleep peacefully in his arms. Gu Mei looked on with envy. This was a childhood sweetheart. There shouldn't be anything else between them. Cher wanted freedom, but Yun probably wanted that sense of security. No matter how strong and valiant he appeared, deep in his heart, he was still afraid of losing her. He didn't believe that if he let go, his little girl would still be his. He watched over her quietly until the sky turned dark. Gu Mei said softly, "Mr. Yi, I'll go back to the hotel and get someone to prepare some food." The doctor said that Cher should eat something light. Cher had been spoiled since she was young. She didn't trust the food outside, and GM had the best Chinese chef. When she said that, Yun nodded lightly and passed the car key to Gu Mei. When only he and Cher were left in the ward, he turned sideways and hugged the little girl with one hand. His forehead was pressed against hers, and he murmured, "I shouldn't have let you eat 2 portions." Sometimes, he indulged her too much. Even though he knew that she might have a gastrointestinal infection, he couldn't bear to eat her. When she wanted to go, Mei returned to GM Hotel and instructed the 5-star chef to make a bowl of hot porridge. While waiting, she wanted to go back to her room to take a shower. The elevator opened. She saw a very refined and handsome young man at the door. Gu Mei hesitated and asked, "Looking for me?" Zhou Chengwang looked at Gu Mei and smiled politely. "My name is Zhou Chengwang." As soon as he finished speaking, Gu Mei looked at him with a complicated gaze. She had thought that this guy was quite good-looking, but she hadn't expected him to be boss's mistress. He was fine and looked decent. Why did he have to become a male mistress? In terms of looks, there wasn't much difference between the male mistress and boss. However, it wasn't appearance that mattered now. It was aura. Think about it. Boss was only 20 years old, but he was already the vice president of Boyi and had control of hundreds of billions of assets. With a stomp of his foot, the entire B city would shake, not to mention that he was the designated successor of President Tang. The male mistress in front of her, on the other hand, was as gentle as jade and looked harmless. There was no way he could fight against the boss. She had seen the boss's ruthlessness before. It was the ruthlessness of a man in his 30s. Thinking of this, Gu Mei almost pitied the male mistress. He could have gone against anyone, but he had to go against the big boss. Zhou Chengwang? Is it the Zhou Chengwang who is pursuing Cher? Gu Mei's voice was light. "But you're late. Cher isn't here. She's in the hospital." Zhou Chengwang frowned. Why did he go to the hospital? Gu Mei leaned against the wall and laughed. "Do you believe that I was tortured by Mr. Yi?" Zhou Chengwang's expression did not look too good. He could tell that Gu Mei's words were mocking him. Gu Mei stopped joking and reminded him kindly, "I don't need to say it. You should be able to guess why Cher was brought to New York. So, Zhou Chengwang, don't get close to her anymore. She doesn't need you to save her. If you get close to her, it will only make her life difficult." Zhou Chengwang clenched his fists slowly, and his face was a little depressed. "If they're good, why is she in the hospital?" Chapter 2006. Zhou Chengwang's lips moved slightly. Before he could say anything, Gu Mei continued, "Just like what you're thinking, Cher was unhappy at first and would resist. But their relationship for so many years couldn't be broken just like that." She looked at him and said softly, "They've already reconciled." Gu Mei said so much because she wanted Zhou Chengwang to know that there was no room for a third person in their world. Zhou Chengwang had a hard time digesting Gu Mei's words. After a long time, he said softly, "I just want to see her." Gu Mei sighed in her heart. What infatuated person. Then she smiled. "All right, but I can't guarantee that it will be a good scene. She said it very straightforwardly, but Zhou Chengwang knew that she was sick after running around the world. He wouldn't be at ease if he didn't see her. So, when Gume arrived at the hospital, she brought Zhou Chengwang with her. She didn't tell Yi Muyun beforehand. When she reached the ward, she looked at Zhou Chengwang. "Wait for me outside." Zhou Chengwang didn't want to make things difficult for her, so he nodded. Gume walked into the ward. Yi Muyun was sitting on the sofa, handling work while Cher seemed to be asleep. She walked over and said softly, "Mr. Yi, there's a classmate who wants to see Cher." The pen in Yi Muyun's hand paused for a moment. Instantly, he roughly knew who it was. His tone was a little indifferent. "Tell him that I won't be seeing him." Gume coughed softly. "Mr. Yi, can you represent Cher?" When she wakes up and makes a fuss again. Yi Muyun looked up at Gume and said in a bad tone, "You seem to have forgotten who pays your salary." Gume immediately touched her nose and went out. She looked at Zhou Chengwang and smiled mischievously. "Classmate Zhou, I'm sorry. Mr. Yi won't let me see him." Zhou Chengwang looked down and said in a low voice, "What about Cher? I suggest you call her Tang Cher. After all, we're not that close, and it's unlikely that we'll be that close in the future." Gume reminded him in a tone that was neither too light nor too heavy. "I've said it before, if you get close to her, it will only make her life harder." Zhou Chengwang looked up at Gume and asked softly, "You all think it's good for her to be with him like this, right? You think she's very happy, right?" Gume smiled. "You have to ask Cher herself whether she is happy or not." After that, she said softly, "Zhou Chengwang, Cher likes Mr. Yi. She won't like anyone else." Now that Yi Muyun had fallen in love with her, she couldn't run away. She was willing and didn't want to run. Zhou Chengwang slowly took a step back and leaned against the wall. He did not say anything. After a long time, Gume looked at him walking toward the elevator. She looked at his thin back view and suddenly felt a little pity for him. It must be the first time that such an outstanding boy fell in love with someone. It was a pity that he had met such a strong opponent like Mr. Yi. She felt sorry for Zhou Chengwang. Gume watched him disappear in the elevator before returning to the ward. Hearing the door open, Yi Muyun didn't even raise his head. He only said calmly, "Is he gone?" Gume closed the door and nodded. She then looked at the girl lying on the hospital bed. At this moment, her Mr. Ye's voice rang out again. "I don't want her to know that Zhou Chengwang has been to New York. Gume, you know what to do." Gume cursed in her heart. How could a pure lamb like Zhou Chengwang fight against such a black-bellied big boss? Chapter 2007. Gume came back to her senses. What about Cher? Someone had to take care of her, especially changing her clothes and wiping her body. Gume felt that she had the attributes of an old maid. But her Mr. Yi paused and said naturally, "I will take care of her." Gume felt that it was inappropriate at first, but then she thought about it. Cher and Mr. Yi seemed to have slept together a long time ago. Changing clothes was probably a piece of cake. Thinking of this, she looked at Yi Muyun as if she was looking at a beast. Yi Muyun glanced at her. Gume pointed at the food box. "Other than Cher's porridge, I also brought Mr. Ye's dinner and 2 bags of clothes." The more she said, the more she felt that she had the potential to be an old maid. But Mr. Yi seemed to want to be an old maid more. Gume left. On the first floor of the hospital, she saw Zhou Chengwang. The young man, who looked very young and outstanding, was leaning against the wall and smoking. She noticed that the brand of the cigarette was American, and Zhou Chengwang coughed violently for a long time after taking a puff. Gume couldn't bear to look at him. "You don't know how to smoke, but you still want to pretend to be profound." Gume leaned against him and looked at Zhou Chengwang with her head tilted. "Do you have any more cigarettes?" Zhou Chengwang looked at her. Before he said anything, Gume had already taken out a cigarette from his pocket. She lit it up skillfully and puffed at his handsome face. Zhou Chengwang looked at her and pursed his lips. "It's not good for girls to smoke. Who made that rule?" Gume's beautiful fingers held the cigarette, and her eyes were a little blurred. "When I was smoking, you were still peeing your pants." She patted his shoulder comfortingly. Gume was actually the same age as Zhou Chengwang, but she was sent abroad when she was young. Those papers drove her crazy. She started smoking when she was 12 or 13, but she didn't smoke so much in the past 2 years. Zhou Chengwang looked at Gume. Gume blew out a beautiful smoke ring. A good student should go back and study hard. This place doesn't suit you, and Cher doesn't suit you either. She took the cigarette from his fingers and narrowed her eyes. Let's leave New York. Zhou Chengwang didn't say anything and walked out of the corridor. This child is really stubborn. Gume put the cigarette to her lips and took a deep puff. She narrowed her eyes and looked at Zhou Chengwang's back. In the ward, Yi Muyun walked over and sat at the head of the bed, looking at Cher. Her little face was still a little pale as she lay there quietly. His large palm caressed her slightly cold face and patted it lightly. "Baby." Cher slowly woke up. She opened her eyes to look at him and softly called out, "Brother, get up and eat some porridge." He gently ruffled her fluffy hair and helped her up. Cher looked out of the window and asked quietly, "Brother, what time is it?" Yi Muyun smiled and kissed her little ear. "It's almost 8 o'clock. Are you hungry?" Cher looked around and saw the 2 lunchboxes. She knew that he hadn't eaten yet, so she pulled his sleeve and said softly, "Brother, have you eaten?" Yi Muyun felt an indescribable warmth in his heart. He stroked her long hair. "I'll feed you first, and you can feed me later, okay?" She stared at him and gasped. "I'm a patient." Chapter 2008. She obediently lay in his arms and said, "Baby, hurry up and eat. Big brother will be able to eat soon." After she said that, his gaze fell on her face. After a while, he rubbed her hair and said, "Idiot." "I'm not an idiot," she said childishly. Then, she leaned in his arms and ate obediently. Every time she was so obedient, he would have the illusion that he was a father. Just thinking about it made his heart warm up again. As he rubbed and fed her, he couldn't help but scold her. "You're not allowed to eat random things in the future." Cher obediently listened and said in a small voice, "Then I'll only eat one in the future." As she said that, she looked at him eagerly. There was a touch of moving moisture in her eyes. Yi Muyun reached out and covered her eyes. Because she was looking at him, he couldn't do anything to her. The little girl lifted her little body and hugged his arm with some difficulty. Her voice was extremely soft. "Big brother." There was a teasing cry in her pleading voice. She didn't even know how seductive she was. Yi Muyun let go of his hand and looked at her cute little face. He knocked her little head and said, "You're still in the hospital and you're already thinking about eating." He suddenly lifted her chin and asked her seriously, "Baby, do you like to eat salty things?" For some reason, Cher felt that his gaze was a bit domineering, as if it was dyed with a layer of jade. She didn't understand what he was saying, but she was a little scared at the moment. So, her voice trembled a little. No, she liked sweet things since she was a child and didn't like salty things. She originally thought that he wouldn't force her, but his fingers touched her red lips and his voice was very calm. "You have to like it in the future." "Why?" the little girl asked boldly. In fact, she was actually afraid. Yi Muyun's fingers were still slowly touching her red lips. He said indifferently, "Because I want you to eat it." The little girl lowered her little face. After a long time, she softly said, "I'll eat it." Big brother was bad. Big brother forced her to eat things she didn't like. But when she grew up, she would think that he was even worse. The young man looked at the little girl crying. Even the way she cried was extremely moving, and he couldn't help but laugh. He reached out and rubbed her hair. "Little fool." After Cher finished eating, she tugged at his clothes. "Brother, eat." When her brother lowered his gaze and stared at her for a long time, she didn't know that her brother only wanted to eat her up. In the end, Yi Muyun hastily ate some. After cleaning up, he took a hot towel and helped her wipe her body. When he helped her wipe, both of them felt uncomfortable. After all, they were both young men and women, and he was hot-blooded. Looking at the tender little girl, his whole body was hot, and his hands rubbed harder and harder. Cher called him Big Brother, her voice extremely seductive. Yi Muyun looked at her and abruptly threw away the towel in his hand. His large palm replaced the towel. The quilt rose and fell, and from time to time, the soft voice of a little girl could be heard. Big brother, be good, don't move. He coaxed her, but she really didn't listen. In the end, he could only hold her little hand and pin it to the side of his body. He was too distressed. How should he treat her? He only kissed her once, and she was already this scared. Chapter 2009. She couldn't move and couldn't see, but she could feel the hidden warmth coming from his body. She suddenly burst into tears, biting her lips as she cried, making his heart flutter. If you cry again, I will eat you under the blanket. She cried like this, but he felt that it was very sweet, so he wanted to scare her. He was this childish, but he would only be like this in front of her. His gaze was completely scattered. Only the little girl's cries were real. His heart was extremely soft. He hugged her and coaxed her for a long time. Until he couldn't breathe, he pulled off the blanket, and the light in front of him suddenly brightened. The little girl was obediently lying in his arms, looking indescribably obedient. Yimei lowered his head, kissed her eyes, and smiled. You're still crying. You're already so big. As he said that, his hand started to mess around, and he rubbed her a few times. Cher raised her head. Her little nose was red, and there were 2 tears on her long eyelashes. She realized that he bullied her, but it was also very comfortable, so she softly hummed like a cat. Originally, he just wanted to tease her, but now he couldn't let go. He whispered in her ear, "Baby, help me, okay?" Cher's breathing was messed up, and she looked at him with a gaze that made his hair stand. After a while, she softly said, "Brother, I'm sick." Brother is also sick. If you don't believe me, see if you're different from usual. The bully brother shamelessly forced her to do what she did for him that day, and Cher had no choice but to do it while crying. In the end, she still threw a little tantrum and hurt him. Even if he was angry, he couldn't let it out because she was crying so hard. Moreover, he did bully her when she was sick. As she cried, his heart sweetly thought that it was good to be like this for the rest of his life. In their world, there was no one else. As he coaxed her, Cher fell asleep. Yimei hugged her and took out his laptop to deal with his work. It wasn't until late at night that he hugged her to sleep. The next morning, he had to go to the company and ask Gumei to accompany him. However, before he left, he still fed her before leaving and helped her change into a new set of pajamas. Gumei saw the meticulous service and didn't know if she should sympathize with Cher or feel happy for her. It should be every girl's dream to be doted on by such a handsome and capable man. After Yimei left, Gumei poured a glass of warm water for Cher, but before she passed it to her, she found a suspicious hickey on Cher's neck. A few of them had been kissed until they were green and purple. She was a little stunned. Mr. Yu was really a beast. Gumei's eyes felt a little hot as she looked at him. Does it hurt? His fingers touched it lightly, and Cher covered it with the blanket. Her face was flushed red. Gumei smiled. Does it hurt? It's all right. Cher bit her lip. Have you ever been bitten? Gumei was 2 years older than her. She should have had a boyfriend, right? As she asked this, Gumei's expression was a little stunned. Then she smiled lightly. No. Oh, Cher replied. Then she said slowly, I wanted to ask you how it feels to be in love. Gumei imitated her and hugged her knees. After a while, she said, I think I like someone. Chapter 2010. When she woke up early in the morning, there were different men beside her. She had sex with those men, but there was no feeling at all. She got tired of it. She started to be alone. She couldn't fall in love with anyone. She thought she didn't have the ability to love anyone until she saw that white moonlight. Unfortunately, that white moonlight also belonged to someone else. That white moonlight loved innocent girls like crazy. Gumei laughed softly. She laughed so hard that she was about to cry. Yes, everyone liked innocence. She liked innocence too, but she knew she wasn't worthy. She had long been dyed black. When Gumei came back to her senses, she saw Cher staring at her. She couldn't help but laugh. Why? Is it strange that I like someone? Cher stuck out her tongue. I thought you only liked those profound numbers. Gumei blinked. I also like those profound postures. Cher's face turned red. She called out softly, Gumei. Gumei looked at her blushing face. She thought that Mr. Yi probably didn't go to the last step. Otherwise, Cher wouldn't be so shy. She admired Mr. Yi a little. He actually didn't eat up such a tender girl by lying with him every day. Thinking about it, his self-control was too good. After Gume was done teasing the little girl, she let her get up. After a while, the nurse's doctor came over. After a checkup and confirming that there were no major problems, she would be put on a drip for another 2 days. Cher lay on the bed. She looked out of the window in boredom. Then, she looked at Gume and said softly, "Gume, after I'm done with the drip, how about we go out for a walk?" Gume lay on the sofa and looked at her. "I don't dare. You are Mr. Ye's darling. You're sick now. Just lie down obediently." Cher was a little disappointed. She pouted and didn't say anything. Gume was still looking at her. Looking at her beautiful face, she thought to herself, such a beautiful girl. No wonder Mr. Yi treasured her so much. Even she couldn't help but feel that the white moonlight was so beautiful. She looked at her silently for a long time. Only then did she retract her gaze. But she couldn't control her emotions. At noon, the manager of GM Hotel personally delivered the food. When she went down to get it, she saw Zhou Chongwang on the first floor. He sat quietly on the bench on the first floor of the hospital. He didn't sit on anything. He just sat there as if he was waiting for someone. Gume sat beside him. "Who are you waiting for?" Zhou Chongwang looked at her quietly. "No." Gume patted his arm. "Do you have a cigarette?" Zhou Chongwang's gaze deepened. "Smoking is prohibited here." "Oh," Gume slowly replied. Then, she picked up the lunchbox in her hands. "I'm going up." Zhou Chongwang looked at her and said with difficulty, "Can I see her?" Gume sighed. "Why bother? She won't belong to you." After a pause, she said, "Don't make things difficult for me." Zhou Chongwang did not speak again. Gume could not help but ask, "Will you still wait here?" He grunted and smiled. "I won't make things difficult for you." Gume froze and looked down. "I'll let you see her, but don't let her find out." She looked up again. Her gaze was indifferent. "I've said it before. Your liking is her burden." She had seen Cher and Yi Muyun interact. If there was no one else, Cher would be able to live her life happily. Who said that girls had to have their own opinions? You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.